Hi, this is Dan Albaum. Thanks for coming to check out Market Impact Insights. I have something really exciting to share, and that's the release of my new book, The Giving Edge: Why Putting Others First Creates Your Greatest Advantage. Through the real-life stories of 37 remarkable leaders, you'll see how their choice to bring a giving mindset every day has been the key for them to create maximum positive impact. You see, when we invest in lifting others, we see exponential returns in terms of influence, in terms of our leadership legacy, in making your organization and the world in which you live in a better place. You'll be able to find A Giving Edge wherever you find books. Beginning on June 9th, it's available right now as an ebook for pre-order on Amazon. I can't wait for you to experience The Giving Edge and look forward to your feedback. Now on to this week's podcast.
Welcome to another edition of Market Impact Insights, your podcast source for business leadership perspectives to help your business grow. Hear from experts in marketing, sales, business strategy, and more, with practical advice for business success. Make sure you won't miss the latest episodes by visiting marketimpactnow.com. Now, here's your host, Dan Albaum.
Welcome back to another amazing episode of Market Impact Insights. The philosophy behind this podcast is that in business, it's all about making a positive impact every day. How do we make an impact as leaders? Well, it's through driving measurable results. That's certainly one dimension. And it's never been more challenging to get that kind of performance and those results through our teams as it is today. We're dealing with so much in the way of intense competition. If you're in B2B right now, you know what I'm talking about. We're dealing with a lot of market uncertainty, a lot of volatility, but still a lot of growth potential here in 2026. And we're going to get into all of these aspects of performance, strength in leadership. How do we get there with someone who has lived a very interesting life and professional journey? Rich Diviney is a best-selling author, a leadership and human performance expert, and a retired Navy SEAL commander. And during his career in the U.S. military, across more than 20 years, he completed more than 13 deployments overseas. What a perspective. We're going to get into that with him. He's been tasked with training others for specialized command. He was involved in extremely specialized SEAL selection process. And he's seen it from that side of things, but also in his work with leaders around the world. Since retiring from the Navy, he's worked as a speaker, facilitator, and consultant at the Chapman and Company Leadership Institute, and also founded the Attributes back in 2020, where he currently serves as CEO. He speaks and consults on leadership strategies, assessment, selection processes, optimal performance techniques. Some of his clients include American Airlines, the San Francisco 49ers, Pegasystems, Zoom, and Deloitte. Rich, welcome to Market Impact Insights.
Oh, thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for.
So, what originally drove your passion to really focus your time and energy to improve the performance of others?
Well, I think it's my passion originated with just performance holistically, and I think one of the reasons is because when you go through something like Navy SEAL training and something that intense, and where, again, the attrition rate for SEAL training is about 90%. So you go through a course like that, and 90% of the guys around you don't make it through, and you start to wonder, okay, well, how did I make it through? So it's kind of a little bit of what I call a healthy imposter syndrome, that kind of translated into this question, this curiosity about, okay, what is it that allows us to perform the way we do in the environments that we do? Obviously, in the Navy SEAL teams, your whole thing is to be able to perform in deep uncertainty, challenge, and stress. And I became fascinated with what allows us to do that. And in the conduct of that curiosity and that questioning, I realized that these things were really more about being human versus being Navy SEALs. And so that kind of took me on the path of really diving into human performance. And when I say human performance, I almost have to say kind of mental human performance, not really physical human performance, but mental. What are those things about us, about the way our brains work, about the way our physiology works that allow us to do what we do when the physical stuff is so broken down or so at zero that all you have is your head and your mind. And so that's kind of, I think that was the impetus, and that spawned the books and really where I am today.
So, reflecting on your journey so far, what's been your biggest personal learning you've taken from that? And have there been surprises for you along the way?
Well, I think the one of the biggest surprises initially was the fact that everything about performance starts in the mind. And I think obviously SEAL training allows you to understand that quite viscerally, but your body can be telling you that it's got nothing left, and it's really about your mind and how you think and the things you do that allows for performance to, in fact, show up. And so that was a surprise. I guess it was somewhat of a surprise for me, when I initially. And I think the learning around that along the way has been, okay, well, how do you tap into that? How do you really deconstruct those things that we have to understand about ourselves and the way our brain works and the way our motivations work and things like that, so that we can in fact perform? Because again, every human being on this planet is going to have to perform through uncertainty, challenge, and stress. It's a part of life. And some time frames or periods seem like there's more uncertainty and stress than others. But whether it's home, whether it's work, whether it's politics, whether it's even sports. I mean, whatever endeavor you're in, the only certainty in life is that uncertainty will show up. And so the learning has been how do we deconstruct that. And I think the biggest, coolest surprise is that this is all human stuff. It's not limited to the top high performers that you see in the military or the athletic fields or even the business realms. It's very human, which means everybody can do it. And if you can articulate it, then you can teach it.
And as part of the equation, when we're in those moments where high stress, there's uncertainty, it feels like there's a fork in the road, we can make an intentional choice. How do we react in that situation? Are we going to basically be overwhelmed, kind of throw our hands up, give up, kind of curl up, and kind of almost be paralyzed? Or are we going to fight through that? I guess that would be a resilience perspective, but isn't there that critical choice that we have to make in that moment?
There totally is. And I think I would say that choice to fight through it is actually perseverance versus resilience. Resilience is, and I make this distinction when it comes to attributes. Resilience is really, well, let me start with perseverance. Perseverance is, I get knocked down 7 times, I get up 8 times. It's every time I get knocked down, I just keep coming, kind of the Rocky Balboa effect. Resilience, on the other hand, is when I get knocked down or knocked off baseline, how quickly and efficiently can I get back to baseline, right? So resilience is really about recovery. It also goes both ways. If something really great happens, how long do I stay, up in the clouds or rest on my laurels or get complacent before I come back to baseline? And so you can be very highly perseverant, like in the attribute sense. You can have high perseverance and low resilience, which is an interesting combination, and someone you have to be careful of, because that person is going to likely be headed for burnout if they're not careful, because that's someone who's going to go and go and go without ever taking time to recover. So all this to say, I think the good news is it's a human condition to persevere. We are survival. Our survival instinct is very strong. And I think most of us will find ourselves pushing through, or at least fighting when we need to fight, which is great. So we need to understand how and when to do that. And on the other hand, on the backside of that, okay, once we've done that, obviously that's going to do some. It's going to take some toll, do a little bit of damage. It's going to take a toll on our system. So are we in fact taking the time to be resilient and in fact recover, come back to baseline, so that we can actually heal, get better, even and learn something, and then be prepared for the next one.
Now, your first book, The Attributes, 25 Hidden Drivers of Optimal Performance, obviously it's zeroing in on this performance dimension. And we're in these really interesting times right now, kind of unprecedented times with so much going on in the world today. As a business leader, what are you seeing that's making leadership and lifting teams to better performance really tougher and challenging today?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things, and the first is what you mentioned. I mean, the world is just a really interesting place, a lot of uncertainty. And I would say it's the most uncertain we've ever seen in our lifetimes. I think if we look at history, there's been time frames in history that were just as, if not more uncertain than what we're going through now. We happen to be living in it. It happens to be our generations living through it. But so you have the external world that's throwing things at us, whether it be the economic picture, the political picture, the ideological picture, the socioeconomic picture. That's all affecting business in certain ways, depending on what business you're in. But then we have the technological uncertainty. I mean, AI alone has thrown a whole new curveball. It's a new evolution to what's going on. I think that a lot of the trepidation and fear and uncertainty I see is people wondering where and how we fit into this constantly evolving picture of artificial intelligence, and the fact that a lot of the skills-based things are now being usurped by artificial intelligence. And so for us, one of the things that's we enjoy is when it comes to attributes, that really starts to define what we are and who we are as human beings. What's our unique kind of massive value proposition? I think the massive value proposition for humans are our attributes, at least one of them. And that's something that AI does not have. So can we in fact adjust and mold and shape and relook at how we're going to approach the world as these changes come along? And that's adaptability at the end of the day. And that another thing we as humans are designed to do, which is the good news.
Do you feel like there's been a natural maybe underestimation? Just if you look at just individual person to person, leader to leader, underestimation of what some of those human strengths are, that we tend to downplay it, underestimate, which means we might be missing an opportunity to bring more of ourselves in and make more of an impact. Do you see that as maybe a natural starting point that we can turn around?
I do, and I think one of the secrets to that, by the way, Dan, is for all of us to understand that uncertainty, challenge, and stress. The best way to deal with it, is to lean into it, because that's when these qualities show up that we may not have seen before. I always say, in the book, I talk about dormant attributes, and these are attributes that we've always been high on, but we've never known we were high on them because we've never been given an opportunity to put in a situation that's teased that particular attribute out. But I would say that almost every one of us, at least if we're adults, have a story that can end with this. If it ends with the phrase, "I didn't know I had it in me," that's a story about an attribute, a dormant attribute coming to the fore that you didn't know existed. And it's challenge and uncertainty and pressure that allows that to happen. If we're not in those types of environments, we're just kind of coasting along, and that's not exercising us to our fullest capability. And so it's very important that we lean into it when it happens. And I would submit that if you get really good at this stuff and you can get comfortable, then you are deliberately stepping into uncertainty, challenge, stress. That's where the real mastery comes, is when we start choosing uncertainty, challenge, stress, choosing new domains, choosing new horizons, and leaning into that stuff. And you learn and you grow and you evolve.
And I'm sure encouragement from others along the way can just play a huge role in just giving us more confidence as we kind of steady our legs in kind of going through those headwinds.
Absolutely. I mean, again, we are social creatures. We know this, and so any type of teaming and teamwork and camaraderie. I mean, I completely will say with 100% certainty that one of the biggest elements of a Navy SEAL's success is the fact that we have teammates that are there doing it with us. I mean, we are doing it as a team. We're doing it because the guy next to us is doing it, and so that type of encouragement is enormous in kind of the ability to explore our own potential.
And you've been a big advocate for servant leadership, which is a common thread for Market Impact Insights and my own passion and advocacy. What does that mean to you? And what should we be doing to prioritize and then be able to deliver that in a meaningful way?
Yeah, what a great question. I mean, servant leadership. There's what I would say is a basic definition of servant leadership, and that is, if I'm a leader, if I'm in charge of people, I want to show up in a way that is is in service to those in my span of care. And that's absolutely 100% the case and should be. However, when it comes to high performing teams, I'll give you a different distinction on this. And it's kind of the way that I describe task, how high performing teams task organize. So the quick backstory of this, I was in front of a group of executives shortly after I retired, and they asked me, I had a flip chart next to me, and they asked me to draw for them what the shape that I thought described high performing teams the most accurately. So what kind of task organizational shape would that be? And we know there's many out there. Obviously, there's the hierarchical pyramid that's probably the most common, where the leader sits on top and the word just flows down to the bottom and has to flow all the way up. That's not obviously a high performing team. It's too slow, too bureaucratic. So that was out. We've also heard of the flat line, the flat model, where kind of a rebellion to the pyramid. They flattened this thing and said, hey, we're all in this together. No one outranks anybody. Everything's groovy, everything's cool. Now that's okay. But the problem with the flat model is that sometimes it's difficult to figure out actually who's in charge. And the other thing on a flat model is that something can happen on the right line that's not necessarily seen or heard on the left side of the line. So in other words, information can get siloed in a flat model pretty easily. And information on a high performing team is never siloed. It's abundant and everywhere. And so finally, I had the last one I had in my head was the servant leadership model. This is the upside down pyramid, where Robert Greenleaf took that pyramid, he flipped it upside down, put the leader on the bottom. I'm in service to everybody in his or her span of care, which is also, if I were to default to that, if I were to default to one of the three, I'd default to that one. However, this is still not actually how a high performing team operates, because in a high performing team, burden is distributed. It's not all on one person. So really, kind of largely in frustration, I drew on the whiteboard there, I drew a blob, an amoeba. And I said, where do you think the leader sits in this amoeba? And I got answers like, front, back, top, bottom, center. And I said, all of you are correct. In this amoeba, the leader is wherever the leader needs to be in the moment. And this is what I call dynamic subordination. Dynamic subordination implies that a team understands that challenges and issues can come from any angle at any moment. And when one does, the person who's closest to the problem and the most capable immediately steps up and takes lead, and everybody follows. So it's a dynamic swap between leader and follower relationship. So the environment changes, someone else steps up and everybody follows. So you're swapping between leader and follower all the time. I also call it alpha hopping. The alpha position just hops wherever it needs to be. This is the definition. This is the truest definition of servant leadership in a high performing team. That is, you are in a position on a team where you are stepping up when it's your turn to step up, and everybody's going to be supporting you. And as soon as the environment doesn't require you to be in front anymore, you step back and now you're in support mode. And so this is how all the highest performing teams operate. If we are if we are the leaders of high performing teams, it is our job to create a dynamically subordinating team. So it's our job to create that environment. And that's true, in my mind, that's true service leadership or servant leadership. I'm creating an environment where the team understands and is capable of stepping up and stepping back, regardless of my input. I'm just simply another player, which again tells us something very interesting and something true, is that our role or our job on a team has nothing to do with our rank and hierarchy. It has everything to do with what we are there to contribute to the team. So as an officer in the SEAL teams, I went on hundreds of combat missions and I was in charge of every single one. It did not mean I was always being supported. In fact, most of the time it was the opposite. I was supporting other people. Sometimes, however, the environment would shift and they'd be in support. The team would have to support me for a little bit. But that's really what I would define as the truest form of servant leadership, is dynamic subordination, where everybody understands that sometimes they're in service to people, sometimes they're in charge, right? Or they're in the lead. And that's how the highest performing and fastest and most dynamic teams actually task organize.
Yeah, I love that dynamic subordination in addressing one of the biggest pain points that I've seen in multi-level hierarchical organizations, where so often the people that are closest to where the problem, right, or the issue is, maybe it's closest to customer interface, feel disempowered and their voices aren't heard when trying to solve a problem that can really address that customer experience. And so what you're talking about is the forward thinking here is to be flexible and dynamic, to recognize that and to put people at that moment that they're most qualified for into a position of really letting that leadership shine through. And you're in that support mode as a servant leader.
Yeah, 100%. And you're in that, you are ready to fit or jump into any role. That's the idea, based on environment, and the team understands that. And so it's a really phenomenal way of doing business. And again, every high performing team actually usually does this. And the cool thing is, high performing teams are everywhere. They're not just in the sports field or the business world or even the military world, right? A high performing team can be a great marriage. A high performing team can be a group of friends on a trip, or a group of people working on a project for a community together. Any group of two or more people working together towards a common goal or objective is a team. And you can create a high performing team out of any of those sizes.
So you've talked a little bit about your SEAL experiences. When you think about what you brought from there into the work you do now, helping leaders create more impact, what are the biggest transferable skills you think that have really made a difference for you in the business world?
Well, I think one of the biggest is listening, because as a young SEAL officer, you're first of all, you go through SEAL training, and the predominance instructors are enlisted guys. So you outrank your instructors, but they're putting you through this brutal training, and there's a reason for that. They're invested in making sure that you're the type of officer that after they leave their instructor duty, they might go and they might be working for you. And so you're surrounded by these rock stars as instructors, and then you go to a SEAL platoon. You're the young officer surrounded by these rock star natives who've been there for years and years and years, have all the experience, and they know everything, or know a ton of stuff. And if you don't go in there and just listen, you're going to be behind the curve. If you go in there and think you can start dictating and telling people what to do, you're not going to last very long. And so you learn very quickly in the SEAL teams, and this goes for officers, it goes for enlisted, it goes for any of us, is you go into these teams and you listen first, and that's where you then come to gain information and begin to start formulating a plan. Same goes for the business world. It just sometimes looks a little different, but the business world is the same way. Any team, and this could be a CEO working with department heads or even whatever. If that CEO is not listening first, you're not going to have a very effective team. And so this just very simple skill of listening. And when I say listening, I'm saying truly listening. It's not listening like the person's talking, and as the person's talking, I'm just thinking about the next idea in my head. That's not real listening, right? It's like I am hanging on every word, listening to this person and absorbing what they're saying, and it's inputting into my operating system so that I can then respond to it or react to it appropriately. So I think that's probably the biggest skill, transferable skill, that I learned day one of SEAL training and on through my career, that can be transferable to businesses.
Yeah, and it's just recognizing that the power of bringing curiosity into everything you do, and the learning never stops.
Right. Yeah. Mastery. We know the old adage, right? Mastery is a journey, and we know this also experientially, because anybody we've ever met who is a master at anything, they are people who are constantly learning. They're never sitting there saying, "Oh, I'm done. I know it all." They're never arrogant. They're never like that. So, and in fact, we can pick out the people who think they're masters but are not, because of the arrogance and the fact that they think they're done. So yeah, the best performers on the planet are always open and ready to learn more, and that's a really powerful tool.
At the end of the day, what do you think separates truly exceptional leadership from just good enough?
Well, it's the leaders that understand that leadership is a behavior, not a position. Being in charge is a position, leadership is a behavior. And it's also, we have to understand that we don't get to self-designate. We don't get to call ourselves leaders. That's like calling yourself good looking or funny. Okay. Other people decide whether or not you are someone they want to follow based on the way you behave. You can be in charge all day long, but and you can say you're a leader, but if you look back and no one's following you, yeah, I got bad news for you, right? So being in charge is easy. You can be placed in charge of anything, but whether or not you are a leader depends on the people around you deciding you are someone they want to follow. And so the exceptional leadership are those people who behave in a way that allow people to say, that is someone I want to follow. That is someone I am looking at, I'm listening to, and I want to be around, versus the person who comes in and it's a position and they're just in charge. And people are like, again, this happened in the military a few times at least, where there would be someone who was in a hierarchical position above me, and I'd be like, I wouldn't follow that person anywhere. Meanwhile, there's someone over to my right who's has no hierarchical position whatsoever, and I'd be like, I would follow that person to hell and back. Okay, it had nothing to do with hierarchy or position; it had to do with the way they behaved. And so I think the exceptional leaders behave in a way that allows people to choose them as leaders. And the old adage is, are leaders born or are they made? And the answer is they're neither. They are chosen. They're chosen by the people who choose to follow them.
Yeah, it seems like the vicious trap that so many people fall into is when they assume that they'll just let title grant them automatic respect and credibility rather than truly earning it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and again, you can see those people. You can spot those people a mile away, usually. And sometimes again, depending on the situation, you might have to do what they say, but you're certainly not considering them a leader. You're just doing what they say. So, and that's not a good place to be.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Be patient. The things in the SEAL teams, it's just a fast-paced environment, and most of us guys who get out of the SEAL teams expect for our next life to move as rapidly as our previous life did. And those people I talked to in the business world said, no, you gotta slow it down. You gotta understand this is a paced event. You understand there's a lot of people involved. There's external things involved that otherwise weren't in your military career. And so I think patience is one of the best pieces of advice I've had. I've been given and I've adopted. So.
Yeah, I've had so many conversations that kind of veer into this whole area of pacing and just what kind of expectations we should be setting for ourselves as leaders and then for our teams. And, in one of those, I'll never forget the quote was, sometimes you've got to go slow to go fast. Right.
Yes.
And so it's really just self-regulation, I guess, in terms of just monitoring and being aware of the situation.
Yeah, and delayed gratification too. That's also part of that patience is delayed gratification, which again, Navy SEALs are pretty darn good at. We can be impatient, but we're pretty good at delaying gratification. In other words, you're going to have to crawl through the mud and muck and swamp areas to get to the mountain that you then have to climb before you get to the apex. And so delayed gratification is big. Don't celebrate too often and too early. Make sure you're understanding that the part of the journey is the toughness.
Yeah. Well, part of that was probably pretty evident to you even when you were going through the initial SEAL training, right? Isn't it? Because that celebration moment, it happens at a very specific point, but only at the end, right? It's not like you're getting those along the way.
Well, I would almost say you're absolutely right, Dan. And I would almost say it's almost to the extent where it's a little bit perverted in the sense that we don't celebrate anything because for us, Murphy is always around the next corner, right? So whether it's SEAL training or an operation in Afghanistan or Iraq, you go do an operation. It's like, man, that went really well. It was one of the best ones we've ever had. No one celebrates because they know tomorrow's op could be the worst one we've ever had. So you almost get trained not to celebrate. In fact, one of the things we have to do as SEALs is learn to celebrate more often because we're so trained to be wary of Murphy coming around the corner.
So when you think about the future, Rich, what makes you optimistic?
What makes me optimistic is that I'm convinced that human beings are inherently good. And just having gone around the world and to some very, very war-torn areas, I can verify that claim. I mean, there's most people on this planet just want to live peaceful lives, do right by their family and their neighbors and their communities. That's what they want to do. Now there's always jerks that are trying to ruin that, and in our case we've tried to find those guys and bring them to justice, but that's the case no matter where we are, whether we're in the US and it's in our businesses or our leadership or whatever. I think we have to just make sure and understand that I do, at least, that we're inherently good. We inherently were designed to actually be social creatures, which means we're designed to care for one another. That's why we have empathy and mirror neurons in our brain. And so that keeps me optimistic in terms of us finding a way that will eventually be good.
It's in the midst of all this noise, and some of it isn't necessarily encouraging. It's never forgetting, when we break it down into humanity, that there's a goodness there that it kind of perseveres.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And honestly, we can deliberately populate our environments with that type of stuff if we choose to. I mean, you can find just as many YouTube videos about awesome, cool, inspiring stuff as you can about horrible stuff. And so the question is, are you making an effort to focus your attention on the good stuff? And I'm not saying we need to be ignorant of some of the bad stuff that goes on. We certainly need to have an awareness and be vigilant in certain cases. But what percentage of your time are you spending on each? And that, I think, that affects the quality of your life.
Do you have any other final advice for leaders who are looking to increase their positive impact and elevate the performance of their teams?
Well, I mean, I would say, without sounding too repetitious, I would say, I think one of the things we focus on is understanding the human beings, understanding the humans on your team. Every human that we team brings a specific and unique set of super advantageous qualities and attributes. And like I say, every human being is like an automobile, but some people are Jeeps, some people are Ferraris, some people are ambulances, some people are party buses, right? And some of the best teams have each of those vehicles on that team, and they can dynamically subordinate in a way that when the party bus is needed, the party bus steps up. When the Ferrari is needed, the Ferrari steps up. And so I think leaders, especially with AI starting to seed its way into a lot of the skills-based things, I think leaders would do very well to start understanding their teams at a human level, so they can start understanding how to deploy and dynamically subordinate their teams in any environment, because that's how you operate in uncertainty. So learn more about the team members as humans and start understanding how they show up and how they can actually contribute in a dynamically subordinating way.
We're back to asking questions. That's where we've come full circle to get that understanding at a human level.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, curiosity, asking questions and curiosity. I mean, and listening. So curiosity mixed with listening. That's a real recipe for success, I think.
Well, Rich, thanks again for sharing your very unique and interesting journey as a Navy SEAL into now how you're helping leaders derive better performance and servant leadership that really understands that dynamic subordination is really the foundation, and never forgetting to make the effort to understand at a human level your teams to sustain that performance. I really enjoyed it. Thanks again for joining.
Thanks, Dan.
And a reminder, please continue to give the gift of feedback to help make this podcast even better. You can do that by going out and giving a rating and a review. It's so easy to do on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And as always, make sure to visit marketimpactnow.com for the latest in business leadership perspectives. So long until next time.